All right, welcome in. Episode 19 of the 4 League Report. Today we're hitting two fronts that absolutely detonated this week. The MLB trade deadline and the first full week of NFL training camps. Two different sports, two different calendars, but the same theme. Teams pushing their chips in, no hesitation, no half measures. The Dodgers go nuclear again. The Red Sox make a franchise-altering move. And in the NFL, we've got contract bombs, quarterback battles, injuries, rumors, and some very real movement in places people aren't paying attention to. Let's get into it. All right, the MLB trade deadline. We're having the wrong conversation about the Dodgers. The 2026 MLB trade deadline came and went Monday evening. Dozens of trades flew across the board, but let's start with the main one that everybody is talking about. Tariq Skubal to the Dodgers. And I'm going to borrow a line from Stacy Roast because she absolutely nailed the framing. We're having the wrong conversation about Tariq Skubal and the Dodgers. Everyone's screaming the same thing. The rich get richer. Baseball's broken. This isn't fair. But the truth is simple. The Dodgers didn't break baseball. They just understand it better than everyone else right now. They have the market. They have the money. They have the developmental pipelines. They have the media deal that gives them an extra $60 million a year. And they have a phenomenal fan base. Here's the part nobody wants to admit. Milwaukee and Tampa could have matched the prospect haul, but they chose not to. Because for those franchises, prospects are lifelines. For the Dodgers, prospects are currency. And that's why the Dodgers get Skubal. The best pitcher available, a 2-time Cy Young Award winner, while everyone else makes excuses. CBS Sports gave the Dodgers an A+. They earned it, not because they're rich, but because they're ruthless. And good for them. The Tigers. The deadline's biggest failure. This is the easiest call of all. A disservice to their fans. Derelict in the most basic duties of competition. The Tigers get an F. They traded Skubal and Casey Mize while sitting near a playoff spot with the second best run differential in the American League. This wasn't a rebuild, this was surrender, and it's the exact opposite of what the Dodgers do. The Red Sox, the biggest winner not named Los Angeles Dodgers, get an A. They paid a massive price for Adley Rutschman, and they should have, because he's a switch-hitting, elite defensive catcher who changes the entire identity of their team. They also added Eric Miller and Curtis Mead. This is what it looks like when a franchise decides to go for it, and all they do is win lately. So good on them for making the correct choices going forward. The Cubs, they get an A. They needed rotation help. They added Clay Holmes, Kevin Gausman, and Braxton Garrett. That's not patchwork, that's a full renovation. And Holmes in front of that infield defense, perfect fit. The Cubs acted like a team that wants to win. The Giants and the Mets, sellers market kings of the deadline. Both teams get strong grades, Giants a B, Mets a B. The Mets turn Clay Holmes, Freddie Peralta, Luke Weaver, and others into 11 prospects, including several top-tier additions. I know not everybody is happy with every prospect. That's fine. They're prospects, okay? Let's not get all bent out of shape. We don't know who is what out of any of these prospects. Even the top prospects don't pan out. The Giants grabbed Marcelo Mayer, a potential franchise shortstop. If you're going to sell hard. Those two franchises did. The Brewers, the almost team. Milwaukee gets a B+. They missed Skubal, and that's the headline. But Dustin May's underlying numbers and velocity bump make him a sneaky good addition. You know, they did improve, but they didn't transform, and that's the difference between a B+ and an A or an A+. The Yankees, the deadline's most disappointing buyer. The Yankees get a D. They needed 3 things going into this trade deadline. A righty hitting catcher, any right-handed hitting catcher, to platoon with what they already have, which is not much. A righty hitting outfielder, and another late inning reliever. You know, they went 1 for 3. Heliot Ramos helps. Luis Garcia Jr., I really like the player. There are questions as far as roster construction goes going forward with the addition of Luis Garcia Jr., but it never hurts to add good players. But this roster just needed more. You know, this was a deadline begging for urgency, and Brian Cashman, in my opinion, just didn't show enough urgency. The Baltimore Orioles, the deadline's most confusing seller. Baltimore gets a D. They got a massive haul for Rushman. That's fine. But they were 2 games out of a wild card spot. They paid Pete Alonso over the winter. They had some momentum, and they punted. You know, this was a retreat, and it wasn't supposed to be a rebuild year. So, very confusing. Not really sure about the direction of the team going forward, and if you're a Baltimore Orioles fan, how could you be confident in the direction of the team going forward? San Diego Padres, the deadline's most chaotic buyer. But they get an A. AJ Preller is over-leveraged, boxed in, and has no choice but to push all in every year, and, you know, so he did. Casey Mize, Robbie Ray, Michael King. They're going to grab the 3rd wild card spot most likely, and they're going to scare some teams. Let's do some quick hits here. The Astros, I'm giving them a C. Quiet, maybe too quiet. The Royals, a C. Lots of moves that, you know, but nothing that really moved the needle. The Angels, a C. They sold 7 players, got 9 prospects, and, you know, nothing really moved the needle for me there as well. They're kind of just stuck in the same purgatory, in my opinion. The Guardians, B+. They were active, they were aggressive, they were smart. The Rockies get a B. Light selling with some continuity. The Twins get a B. Complete bullpen overhaul. The Phillies get a C. You know, Arias helps, but the defense still is a huge issue for this team. Huge, enormous issue. The Pirates, they get a B+. They transformed their bullpen. The Cardinals, they get a B+. Very smart sellers. The Mariners, I'm giving them a C. Just underwhelming, and a team that came in with a little bit of a expectation. The Rays, I'll give them a B. You know, they patched some holes. They added Hicks. Pretty decent deadline from them. Texas Rangers, I'm giving them a D. You know, they tried to sell while being only a game and a half out, and if it weren't for Jacob deGrom blocking a trade to Atlanta, for whatever they would have gotten back for him, you know, who knows, that may have been an F. The Blue Jays, they get a B. They completely balanced buying and selling. The Nationals, I'm giving them an A because they turned found money into prospects, and whenever you could do that, that's just a win, and it has to be an A. The final take for this deadline, for me is if you want to beat the Dodgers in the pre-2027 lockout year or lockout era, or whatever you want to call it, the Wild Wild West era of baseball, if you want to beat the Dodgers, you have to act like the Dodgers. This deadline proved the point. The Dodgers aren't the problem. The problem is the teams who refuse to behave like contenders. Boston behaved like a contender. The Chicago Cubs behaved like a contender. The San Diego Padres did. Baltimore didn't. Texas didn't. Detroit didn't. And that's why the Dodgers walk away with Scooble and everyone else walks away with excuses. Now we're going to turn to NFL training camps because there have been a lot of news. Camp notes, upgrades, downgrades, injuries, rumors, position battles. So let's start with some major contracts, roster moves. Bijan Robinson becomes the highest paid running back ever. 3 years, I think it's $22.5 million per year. This sets the stage for Jahmyr Gibbs to eclipse that. I think he'll be the highest paid running back in NFL history, probably sooner than later. Zay Flowers, who's pretty much become a star player, signs a 4-year, $140 million extension, $108 million guaranteed. Good for him. That's the bag. Chris Olave gets $90 million guaranteed. Good for him. That's the bag. And man, does that duo, that could be a very scary duo down there in New Orleans. Jacoby Brissett signs a 1-year, $15.5 million deal with Arizona. We'll get into that a little bit because that one has become interesting. And Baker Mayfield and Tampa are on a collision course for either the franchise tag or for Baker Mayfield to be traded. This league is shifting a little bit financially. Running backs are getting paid again, and teams are locking in their cornerstones earlier than ever before. That's not something we're used to seeing in the NFL. Quarterback landscape. Daniel Jones. Colts fans will be happy to hear that he did avoid the PUP list. He's moving well. I think the Colts are relieved. He's not 100% yet, but he's practicing without restrictions. Let's go to Minnesota. Kyler Murray and J.J. McCarthy splitting first-team reps evenly. Miscommunications early, but O'Connell's offense is, they're trying to settle things in here. If you're watching the highlights of them at camp, it looks like Kyler's been a little better. And I would be surprised, very surprised, if he isn't the Week 1 starter. Tua Tagovailoa for the Falcons. Minor back tightness, but already back at practice. He is the presumed Week 1 starter for the Falcons because Michael Penix Jr. is still progressing from, ACL surgery. And he's weeks away from full 11 on 11. I don't think he'll start the season. Let's get back to the Cardinals, especially with the news of Brissett inking the 1-year deal. He looks to me like the backup quarterback at this point. Carson Beck, from what I can see and from what I'm reading, looks like the Week 1 starter. Very clean mechanics, calm pocket presence, and it looks like the staff is starting to trust him. And it looks like Jacoby Brissett is going to settle right back into being an insurance policy as he's been his entire career. So I think Carson Beck is the plan, and the Cardinals may have something there. Drake May with the Patriots. New England is speeding up their offense. More tempo, more pace. I think this is really good for his development. It just gives him another angle offensively and just more command of the offense overall. Something to look out for come regular season, especially early. If the Patriots are running a lot of no huddle and he looks like he's in full command, man, I mean, there's nothing to stop him from just continuing to improve and look scarier and scarier. Let's go to Green Bay. Jordan Love. Green Bay wants faster huddle operations and more possessions. With a streamlined wide receiver corps and fewer substitutions, they're trying to just run more plays offensively. I think that was the thought process going in, and the moves made at wide receiver, to me, kind of cemented that. We'll see what kind of pace they play with to start the season. Let's go to Denver. Bo Nix says he's going to run more despite the ankle surgeries. Denver does need that mobility, but I would err on the side of caution. I think, these guys like Bo Nix, who are decent at pretty much everything and really good, accurate quarterbacks, but maybe not the most athletic and not the strongest guys. I would just be a little careful here if I were the Broncos. I would kind of ease him back into that sort of play style to begin the year. Let's look at the running back landscape now, particularly the 49ers running back room. Okay, so the 49ers have been banged up like crazy to start camp. Jordan James, fractured rib. Keelan Black has the early lead for kind of a handcuff role, if we were to talk about it as in a fantasy football standpoint, but picked up an abductor injury. Isaac Guerendo still on the PUP. Khalil Herbert has been added for depth. A lot of questions surrounding this room. The wide receiver landscape, we have to touch on the Giants here because I'm as shocked as many people are about what's occurring in camp right now. Odell Beckham Jr. has been promoted to first-team offense. He's getting reps with the first team. That's notable. I don't think John Harbaugh and his staff would be doing this unless it was warranted, and it looks like he is primed to carve out a huge share of snaps for the Giants on offense this year. Subsequently, we need to talk about Malik Neighbors, because not only did he avoid the PUP after things not seeming to be going really well during the offseason with his recovery, looks very sharp in individual drills. Looks like he's able to cut and separate, and there doesn't seem to be any restrictions on him right now, and he should be a go for week 1. I think that's huge news. It's huge news for the Giants' outlook, at least to begin the season. And then one of the bigger additions in the offseason for the Giants, Isaiah Likely, is going to have a huge role on this offense if Harbaugh has anything to do about it, and he is essentially going to be a supercharged slot weapon for the Giants. And this might be the best wide receiver configuration that the Giants have had since Odell Beckham was there the first time. Very interesting. I would keep your eye out on them. I had them in my last in my NFL preview as a playoff team. One of the teams that might end up shocking the rest of the NFL. Maybe not Giants fans. Everybody's biased about their own team and their fandom. Of course they are. But definitely look out for the Giants. Let's go back to the 49ers, because they did sign Deebo Samuel, and he is back with the team. And Deshaun Stribling. We're pointing these players out because Ricky Pearsall is out for the season. That's a really interesting story. Apparently that injury happened a long time ago. Not sure what to make of it. I don't think the 49ers would make a decision not to have a player get the surgery that was needed for them to be available long term. So a lot of questions there. And then, Kirk is injured. So Stribling pushing for starter reps, and will Debo just fit right back in as one of the main contributors of their offense since he was there last? Zay Flowers for the Ravens locked in as wide receiver 1, and I think he's going to get a ton of volume this year, especially with a new play caller. I think they're going to feature him and Derrick Henry. Pat Bryant for the Broncos, emerging as a reliable wide receiver 3 behind Waddle and Sutton. Cyrus Allen for the Chiefs so far, camp standout. He does have a bone bruise, but he's only day-to-day, and I think the Chiefs are recalculating his role. Back to the Ravens, Jacoby Lane has been an early standout. Lamar apparently loves him, and he could push Bateman for wide receiver 2. Something to look out for. Not much on the tight end front, except for the fact that Kenyon Sadiq for the Jets had a setback from his hernia surgery. The reports are that he should be ready for week 1, but anytime you get a setback from a surgery, it's something to be a little wary of. And he was drafted to play immediately, so this is a little concerning for the Jets. Some more injuries and just overall, watches. Lions safeties, Kirby Joseph, lingering knee injury. Brian Branch recovering from an Achilles injury. And that's pretty much it. So I also want to touch on the Commanders wide receiver room, because the Stephon Diggs interest, turning out to be real. Chiga Okonkwo functioning as essentially wide receiver number 2 is interesting after his failed stint with the Titans. And Jaden Daniels has been looking sharp with high-end elite ball placement. So that's pretty much it, for the NFL report. And I think it's really interesting that, Major League Baseball went as nuclear as it did at the trade deadline. I have to admit, I was one of the people who predicted a quieter deadline due to the looming lockout. And I was proven wrong by that. There were as many opportunities that I could remember that teams jumped on from a buyer's and seller's standpoint that I could remember from years past. So the looming lockout didn't seem to affect it overall on a large scale. However, there were some teams, as we mentioned before, who decided to retreat even though they were right on the cusp of a playoff spot to this point in the season. So you have to wonder if those teams and their decision making was affected by the looming lockout, something that we have been following for a little while, something that we will continue to follow as the months go on. And the current CBA ends in December for Major League Baseball, so you can bet that we will be giving you constant updates regarding that and that front. Thank you again for tuning in to the 4 League Report. I'll see you next time.